speak in the language. We shall see how closely he actually sticks to his script, and that might cause some of his party a little bit of nervousness, considering the faux pas that happened in Dundalk.
Yes, indeed, and it was one of the concerns as well with the speech in Ulster University. You know, would he stick to the script, or would he veer off? And there were points where he did seem to veer off a little bit, but not on a huge tangent. But certainly the walkabout in Dundalk last night gave rise to what will be remembered probably as the faux pas of this visit, albeit I don't think it has overshadowed everything else that has happened so far, at least. But yeah, there is that concern, especially we know the character of President Biden as well. He likes to have that level of familiarity with people he's engaging with. He likes that informality as well, to be able to converse loosely. And there is always the danger with that with any politician, but especially somebody who's more minded towards that kind of engagement, that level of engagement, that they will say something without any intent of causing harm or insult or anything like that, but that could ultimately have that effect. And we spoke a lot yesterday in Belfast about the significance of words and just how meaningful words are in the Northern Irish context. And certainly, yes, we're in the Republic of Ireland now. It's a very different political sphere, but we have 4 of the 5 leaders of the main political parties in Northern Ireland here. What happens and what is said here will have as much resonance as the words that were spoken in Belfast yesterday. So all of these factors will be playing into that picture as well.
And David, just take us through who will actually be in the Irish Parliament listening to the President's address. We know there'll be 2 former Prime Ministers and also a former President in attendance.
Yeah, 2 former Taoiseach. Bertie Ahern, of course, one of the co-signatories of the Good Friday Agreement, alongside his then British counterpart Tony Blair, and Enda Kenny, who was the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister, just before Leo Varadkar. Both have retired from office, although there's lots of speculation about whether or not Bertie Ahern will make a run for Áras an Uachtaráin to stand for the presidency in the next election. And we've been reflecting today on how this morning will have been the last time President Michael D. Higgins welcomed an American president, because his term is in its last couple of years now. And in the House also is a former President, Mary McAleese, who was considered to have played an instrumental role also in the journey towards peace in Northern Ireland. She comes from Northern Ireland herself, from Belfast. Her family home was attacked in North Belfast during the Troubles, so she had first-hand experience of all of that and played her part in helping to move the process forward, and has been quite vocal since she left office about the difficulties that have been created by the UK's decision to leave the European Union, and the focus that it has brought back to the border question and the constitutional question here on this island. But it's a fairly full house, Julian, as you can see. The Irish government at the moment, as it has been I think since the mid-80s, is a coalition government, which always means it's fairly fragile. It's made up of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens. Leo Varadkar, it was actually a 3-way tie in the last general election, which between Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Sinn Féin. So Sinn Féin is the main opposition party, led by Mary Lou McDonald these days, but Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin are the 2 men who really have shared the joint office during the term of this government, moving between the offices of Taoiseach, Prime Minister, and Taoiseach, Deputy Prime Minister, since the election.
And we believe that 4 leaders of the 5 major parties will be in attendance. Tell us a bit more about that, because there's a significant absence, we think there will be.
I have heard from sources that there will be leaders of the four of the 5 main parties. We'll not know that until, I think, the Concordia, the Speaker of the Parliament, welcomes guests who are in attendance. But I understand that Michelle O'Neill, who is the Sinn Féin leader at Stormont and First Minister designate, the first nationalist to have been elected to that office, but of course she's never properly assumed the office because there is no power sharing. She's here. I understand the Alliance Party leader, that's the leader of the Middle Ground Party, Mí Long, a party that doubled its representation, interestingly, in the last election, an indication perhaps of a new generation voting differently in Northern Ireland. She going to be in attendance, we're told too, along with the leader of the nationalist SDLP, the party that was led by John Hume, of course, the man often described as the architect of the peace process. Colm Eastwood will be here, as will Doug Beattie, who is the leader of the perhaps more moderate Unionist Party and is always, I suppose, seeking to extend a hand of friendship across communities and across the border. One notable absentee, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. Not that that's terribly unusual in this scenario. He's a member of the British Parliament, of course, at Westminster, and Unionists take their lead from Westminster, and therefore he would perhaps not have considered this an appropriate time to be in attendance, because his party is in election mode, as are they all in Northern Ireland ahead of the local council elections at the beginning of May.
But Dr. Rice, what can we read into the what we think will be the absence of the DUP and Geoffrey Donaldson today? What does it say about the optics? How do they look?
Far from positive, to be blunt about it. So we have a leader designate, effectively Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, who isn't coming today, hasn't, well, seemingly, as far as we can tell, hasn't accepted what we assume would inevitably have been an invitation to come along. It would be very unusual to expect that we would have one party leader that wasn't invited and all of the others to have been. So the optics really aren't positive with it, but by the same token there is a logic there as to why that invitation wouldn't have been accepted. But it depends what perspective you look at the issue from, how you might interpret what's happened there with it.
Well, we can see the motorcade making its way now to Leinster House, where President Joe Biden will address both houses of the Irish Parliament. They're running a little behind schedule, as he has done for most of the day. We're expecting him to deliver his speech at around 5:15. You can hear the crowds welcoming him. Yeah, the President waving back also from the Beast, from the back seat of the Beast, as the motorcade rolls in.
And as he makes his way to Leinster House, he is going to pass a 4-storey building with a little blue circle on the wall, which tells you it was once the home of W.B. Yeats, one of Joe Biden's favourite poets. He often quotes W.B. Yeats and Seamus Heaney. Those are the two poets, perhaps, who are most globally recognised, I think, these days from this island. And so I think he will be amused if that's pointed out to him, that he's driven past the home of one of his two favourite poets.
And I read that he used to practice reading Seamus Heaney over and over and over again as a way to master his stutter.
Yes, a bit like the King's Speech.
Yes,
a similar
exactly
sort of
like that
scenario, but he has quoted W.B. Yeats so often as well, in terms of his reflection on his Irish ancestry, the man who wrote the famous poem about the 1916 Easter Rising. All changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. And I think he also coined the phrase in one of his poems, "the peace comes dropping slow." And that has certainly been the case for this island. The journey towards peace has taken much longer than many people would have hoped in Northern Ireland, and the journey towards reconciliation between the divided communities there even longer. The Good Friday Agreement, which I'm sure he'll talk about today, largely silenced the guns and the bombs, but it has not produced reconciliation between the two communities. I asked Tony Blair about that recently in an interview we did to mark the 25th anniversary, and his reply was, reconciliation is the work of generations. And so we've seen a generation grow up with a relative peace in Northern Ireland, but the business of integration and uniting a divided society, it takes more than one generation, in the former Prime Minister's opinion.
And he's referencing the peace babies that President Biden was addressing at Ulster University in Belfast, and his theme was very much the future, and that the the tentative piece and the fragile pieces in their hands.
Yes, most certainly, and it ties in with the broader theme of particularly the visit to Northern Ireland, which was very much trade-focused, economy-focused, and very much putting the focus on how the young people of Northern Ireland, that post-1998 era of people who were born, how they can harness the opportunities and take forward and reap the benefits of the relative peace that Northern Ireland has been able to enjoy over the last quarter of a century. But the difficulty is, of course, that comes with a price of sorts, in that those benefits can only really fully be harnessed if we have functioning institutions in Northern Ireland. So there's constantly and consistently been a covert and an underplayed, still very clear message to politicians in Northern Ireland, particularly towards the Democratic Unionist Party, that this has to be the priority. It's not necessarily the generation that's in power now. It needs to be politics with an eye to the future in order to effectively harness the opportunities. And we heard Leo Varadkar earlier today as well, saying that the benefits that Ireland has received in terms of support and trade relationships with the United States has been instrumental in Ireland's economic success over the years as well. So kind of playing into that wider narrative that actually, this isn't just hyperbole, this isn't just an abstract concept of something that might happen, very much saying that when the opportunities are taken, they will follow through. So, yeah, really, really setting the carrot and stick approach, if we can use that phrase, with regard to those opportunities, but very much with an eye to the future and looking to the post-agreement generation to try and make the most of that.
Yeah, just seeing Anthony Blinken there in our shot and the American delegation. We previously saw the President